It's episode 7 with 7 questions for yours truly, MJ Knight. We start off with this week's from one of my anime fans, Mr. Hero of Light. Sir, always a pleasure to hear a question from you. His question for this episode is, what is your favorite character in DBZ? I know I'm going to sound a little bit predictable here, but honestly, my favorite character in Dragon Ball Z, and indeed the whole Dragon Ball franchise, is Goku. Now, some could argue that Goku's a little bit goofy in some places, obsessed about food, but when you look at the character, I mean, this is just from my perspective, just take my opinion for what it is. The character in general is well-rounded, has a good sense of moral values, even though his soft-heartedness, as Vegeta once put it, tends to cloud his judgment a little, but when you look at it, he's that sort of guy you want watching your back. And, I think he's had some decent voice artists. I mean, Sean Schemmel is synonymous with the Dragon Ball franchise as Goku, but I honestly think that the best voice artist that the first Super Saiyan in 10,000 years that had his voice supplied was the same guy who voiced Scott Summers in X-Men Evolution. Hope that answers your question. Question 2 is from my buddy Firebird Freak 87. Sup, buddy? If you, DCE, and your friends went to Mobius, what would be the first thing you guys would do on Mobius, and why? That's a very good question. For me, I would probably just want to go off and explore, take in all the structures and the zones that are there. Maybe take a few pictures. The mighty Towerson would probably try and do a robotic and try to claim everything in the name of the Mighty One! I think Joshua would try and find Sonic and, praise him for, the character that he is. And I think Random would go and find Shadow and say, I want those 5 hours of my life back from Shadow the Hedgehog. I'm probably exaggerating with that, but, that's just my take on it. And if people, disagree, then, it is what it is. Again from Firebird, question 3. In your opinion, what is the most overrated and underrated American muscle car? That's a very, very interesting question. Now, everyone knows I'm a car guy. Ever since I got into Knight Rider 5 years ago, I've developed a love of cars. If I see certain cars that push the right buttons with me, it's hard for me to take my eyes off them. I mean, the 2005 Ford Mustang, in red or black, beautiful piece of the machinery. The 1980 John DeLorean, or just the DeLorean, fabulous car. The 2008 Chevrolet Camaro, Again, this is just my opinion on this. Probably the most... I say this in a nice way. I think probably the most overrated muscle car. Now, I'm just going this by looks. I do not know the technicalities of, what makes a car work well. I mean, I like cars, for the look of them, the kind of appeal they had. I mean, we all know the DeLorean was nice to look at, but the car was crap back in the day, although they are kind of working on to get it perfected. If I'm being honest, I think the most overrated muscle car, not by much, is probably the 2008 Chevrolet Camaro. Now, this is not the car's fault. I think it's just the way the fans, have hyped it up. And when I say this, I don't mean this in a nasty way. I just think that people give more praise to it than it actually deserves. I mean, it deserves to be recognized as a decent muscle car, but I kind of feel that it gets more praise than it should. But again, I'm not knocking it. Most underrated. It's a very good question. Probably the new Dodge Charger, because I don't hear enough things about it, because the only muscle cars that get talked about these days are the brand new Ford Mustangs with the remodeling that they've had done in the last year, and of course the Chevrolet Camaro. So again, only going by popularity and looks, I think the new Dodge Charger is the most underrated. Question 4 is from my right-hand man, the reliable X24 rider. Buddy, always good to get a question from you. He writes, did you ever get the chance to go to any World Wrestling Entertainment UK pay-per-views back in the day? Sad to say, no, I did not. The closest I have ever gotten to going to any said UK pay-per-views was at the time, WWF tribute show in the southwest of England, where you have people dressing up as the wrestlers. I mean, the show was decent, but it's a tribute show. It's not the same thing. So I can honestly say, no, I have never been to a UK pay-per-view. Sad as it is for me to admit. But then again, I'm getting out of current wrestling after WrestleMania 27. I know that's going to piss off Shattuck23, but buddy, I can't stay in an entertainment industry as a fan when it's sucking more ass than the SmackDown storylines. Mind you, Raw's not doing that much better either. Question 5 is from Firebird Freak 87 again. Did Knight Rider end in 86 or 85? Technically speaking, it's yes to both, because the last episode of Knight Rider G1 was in the summer of 1986, but the series had been cancelled in late 1985. I hope that answers your question on that one. Question 6 is for the unsung Gorax Weevil. And this is actually kind of a he said this to me in a private message. What he meant by, what is my take on the console wars, he did not necessarily mean to say, what do I think about people that bitch over saying the 360's better, the PS3's better. What he actually meant is, what is your take on this crusade against video games? There are some good reasons. I mean, some people say that video games are getting too violent. Some people say that video games are a bad influence and it gets kids' grades to slip in school. Well, for starters, video games are too violent. There's a reason why, over here in the UK we get age restriction certificates, like the games that are 12 or 15 or an 18. It's only for those age groups. The fact that this country in particular is not enforcing the right guidelines to stop kids from getting games they're too young to understand. It's not necessarily the kids' fault. It's the fact that these the authorities are not putting the same kind of guidelines in place, the same way that you wouldn't let a 12-year-old pick up an 18 certificate DVD or Blu-ray. I think there's some good arguments for it, but it's the same predicament that we had some 12 years ago with the quote-unquote video nasties topic here in the UK, where kids were, underage kids were watching, mature content. So, it was, adult content for movies back then for the underage to that were watching. And this time around it's video games. I mean, it's going to be something else along the line. It always seems to go into this sort of trend where the authorities and the governments are harping on something. I'd say there's good valid arguments from, saying how we should get these video games banned, but at the same time, I think a little bit of common sense is probably the best way to look at it from. Hope that answers your question. Question 7 is, again, from Gorax Weevil. Hey MJ, hey Gorax. What are your thoughts on Batista becoming a mixed martial artist fighter and possibly facing Bobby Lashley in early 2011? You mean to tell me that MMA have signed up, a WWE has been, or a WWE should not have been? I mean, don't get me wrong, Batista's a powerhouse. No doubt about it. I mean, this is a guy who, in his short 8-year WWE career, has picked up 2 WWE championships, 2 tag team titles, 1 Royal Rumble win, and quite a few World Heavyweight title reigns to his resume. But let's face it, the guy's just a powerhouse. He doesn't really have any particular skill other than, an earth-shattering spine buster and an absolute gut-wrenching Batista bomb. Facing Bobby Lashley, well, Bobby Lashley is actually genuinely talented. Now, I don't know what goes on in mixed martial artists tournaments. I mean, I've seen footage of former Power Ranger actor Jason David Frank compete in it, and he does well, but he's trained in mixed martial artist background. He has that, over experience to be able to get by in it. All Batista is a glorified bodybuilder. That is all he is. And if there are some Batista fans out there that don't like it, well, look at the disclaimer. You have the option to click off if you don't like what I say, deal with it. But again, what are my thoughts on it? Well, if the guy can actually, get some decent moves to his name rather than just being a powerhouse, then fine. But at least with Bobby Lashley, he's a powerhouse, but he actually has more than 3 moves to his name. And come to think of it, now that I look at it, and I know this is going to piss off some people, but, screw it, I don't care. Batista is basically a bigger version of John Cena. John Cena knows only about 3 or 4 moves. And yet they keep Cena, but get rid of Batista. Although from what I understand, there was a couple of things behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know the full skinny of it, but Batista said quite a few offhand remarks about the company that got him in trouble with Vince. And of course, you know what happens in WWE, if you even piss off the boss, you're gone. And I can't think of too many offhand, but it's like where they, a superstar will be really taken seriously, and he does something, not necessarily stupid, but does something that he should have known better, and they make fun of it. I don't know. Really don't know what to make of it. Anyway, those are your 7 questions for this week. You know the drill, as usual. PM, channel message, or leave a note in the comments below the video. But until next time, class, Q&A out. Question 3 again is from Firebird Freak 87. In your opinion, what is the most overrated and underrated American muscle car? Right, I need to be very, very concise with what I'm about to say. I may be a car guy in terms of, the sheer performance and how they look, but I do not know all the technicalities of what makes a car perform well and what makes it look worse than the handling of a DeLorean from back in the day. I could give opinions on what cars I think are the most overhyped, only going by word of mouth, and the same thing with underrated, but I cannot give a detailed experience as to what I think a car is more overrated than, say, the kit stang from Knight Rider, or what car is underrated like the current Dodge Charger. I really cannot fully answer that question. Sorry about that, buddy, but I cannot give an answer that would be of no use to anyone, or could be misinterpreted as false information. Sorry about that.